Okay, hi. This week I feel compelled to just drop in with a midweek check-in, in particular because we have such a strong transit today of Venus in Leo opposing Pluto in Aquarius, in particular because the moon is also in Leo very newly right now, and the moon will conjunct Venus right around the same time that Venus will make her exact opposition to Pluto. And what that all about is essentially us coming to terms with something that we started back in January. That was the Venus-Pluto conjunction. So since then, how many? It's almost been 6 months now. We've kind of lived out that Venus-Pluto storyline. And what is that storyline? It's about how you feel comfortable, how you love being a part of a group, an important group, basically. And this is also coming off of the heels of several years of transition in and out of other important groups in your life. Since 2008, Pluto was in Capricorn, and then only in the last 2 years did it firmly move into the sign of Aquarius. And wherever Pluto goes, it kind of completely destroys and kills off. And so we go through this really intense, like moth to flame kind of experience with Pluto transits. And in particular, in Aquarius, it's about powerful groups of people and powerful ideas and powerful perspectives. So when the inner planets, like Venus and Mars, come to meet Pluto in the sky, we get a very, very personal, a very subjective connection to that group. So what I'm thinking about is the fact that this Venus-Pluto conjunction is the first time that Venus conjoined Pluto, while Pluto was very firmly in Aquarius. Before, earlier this year in 2026, Pluto was still moving back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius, and we really weren't solidly in one group or another. And it's not even to say that we're super solid in this present group, but I can say pretty confidently that this is somewhat of a new group that has been established or that we are connecting to. And if you're not resonating with this group idea, then there's likely an idea itself, an intellectual framework. Maybe you started school. There's some affiliation to a group that has become important, or at least it is new in your life, and that group might have something to do with like psychology, right? Pluto being that Scorpio placement in the sign of Aquarius, the psychology of detachment, the psychology of attachment, the psychology of belonging, any of these things, Pluto brings a very, very deep, very focused, research-oriented interest into these areas of life. And it can be almost obsessive. We can become obsessive about this group that we are in, or about the idea that we are exploring within that group or that new course of study that we're taking. It can really become obsessive, right? The psychology of of the mind, of our brain, of how our brains work. This is like neuroscience. So anything that's, merging these two ideas together, I would say on an intellectual level is definitely up and present for everyone. But of course, now that Venus is in the mix, and since the beginning of the year when Venus made that conjunction to Pluto, there's something entirely subjective, even more so obsessive about whatever this group dynamic or this intellectual dynamic is. And it does carry with it shadows of the previous Pluto times. I think that's mostly because we still have the North Node moving through Pisces. We're still kind of directionless in this weird way until the end of this summer when the nodes finally switch signs into Leo and Aquarius. But for now, we're still moving with that direction towards Pisces, which is into the infinitude, into compassion, into limitless understanding, into, you know, um, unconditional love for the self and for someone else, which, when it comes to this idea of an obsessive group or something that just really, really has our attention, something that seems life or death almost as well, something that is so on the pulse of how we are transforming our own identity personally, but also how humanity's identity is also transforming itself through technology, through, of course, the uprising of people, the power of the people, and just the different social tides that are turning and swelling. So, all to say that on this day, Wednesday, we have an interesting obsessive dynamic that can come to play. And I've been feeling into this in two ways. One is the way of the past, right? I have felt past Venus-Pluto dynamics come up, which is like obsessive love or um, really singular interest. Venus is such a singular and a personal sign, like something so personal that we are kind of looking on the other side of death now, right? Because when Venus and Pluto made a conjunction in January, it was the death and the rebirth. That's what when a conjunction happens, the two become one. Venus and Pluto became one. And so we were singularly merged with a new group and a new love, let's say, in that group, or a new um, value system that emerged based on that new group. Now that Venus is on the whole other side of the zodiac to Pluto, we are seeing that Pluto a little bit more clearly now from a much different vantage point, from the vantage point of Leo, which is far more attached, if you will. It's far more from the heart and it's far more playful and wants far more warmth and joy than Pluto in Aquarius maybe was able to offer, earlier in the year in January, with everything being just so straight in that Capricorn and Aquarius time, which is a much, much different vibe. Right now, we're almost heading into Cancer season. Mercury is still a major ruler of most of the planets. In fact, the moon is actually ruling all of the planets right now by rulership, modern rulership. If you boil everything down, the moon is ruling everything, which means it's like Cancer seasons come early in essence, and the emotional body is more important than anything right now, and how we are articulating ourselves is becoming um, front and center. And I think this is obviously going to play out in the Mercury retrograde process that happens at the end of this month, or that begins. I mean, we've already begun it, as Mercury has already entered this shadow realm. Now that it will pass once it goes retrograde, we have this duality, because we can see the past obsession. You know what I mean? We have that direct relationship with Pluto right now because we are not Pluto, but we can see it. We can almost see the past that we gave up with Pluto in Aquarius and that new, and we can also see where we are now. But the dynamic of Venus and Pluto can feel very, very unbalanced because Pluto is such a heavy hitter. It's the most obsessive, the heaviest, like, black hole of the chart, essentially. And Venus is very much so not that heavy, very much so not a black hole. And therefore, it feels very out of balance potentially. We're just sitting here like a little flower looking into an abyss. And how could we possibly equal that abyss? How could our personal perspective, how could our personal creative journey possibly um, maintain an equal relationship with the Lord of the Underworld, without having that Lord of the Underworld completely magnetize you and pull you in, flip you around and spit you back out, right? Pluto to me is such a magnetic archetype. And to that end, it literally has a field around it, and it's the strongest field. I think there's an argument that every planet has its own magnetic field in a way, its own gravitational magnetic field. Please don't, you know, hold me to these science terms, but I was looking up like what happens when a stronger magnet and a weaker magnet, like what's the dynamic that's at play, but you really need to know what direction each of the magnets are going, right? Whereas the magnets north node and south poles, sorry, nodes, the magnets north and south poles of the magnet, because as they come closer, that directionality will essentially determine whether the magnets are going to attract or repel. Now, if you can think about it, like when the Venus and Pluto made a conjunction in January, we had Venus and Pluto, which must have been going opposite directions because they magnetized. They were the same. They bonded to each other and then slowly separated out again, right? Whereas this time, when you have an opposition, the poles of Venus and Pluto have to be going the same way because they're not going to conjunct. They're going to remain in this 180-degree opposition, right? But that tension of when two magnets are repelling each other is very palpable. It's like, oh, I can't go there, but I see that and I feel that very, very clearly. And I'm looking straight into the abyss of death. I'm looking straight into the death of my own mind. The death of my own mind is looking straight into my creative desires in my own humanity, my own warmth. Am I strong enough to hold that? Because what happens, I think, if you're not strong enough and that, you get sucked in to the Pluto, to them, you let that magnet sucks you in and you repolarize, like you basically get smushed and then you flip. Your poles literally flip from the pressure of the other stronger magnet, which in this case is the Pluto and Aquarius. And then that's like the exact archetype of being so completely destabilized by obsessive, you can call it obsessive love, or even just like obsessive desire, obsessive meaning. There being something that is so wholly out of your control that you have to give into it. And that is absolutely a Venus-Pluto dynamic, which is, you know, understandably something that most people go through in life. You don't have to go through that crazy dynamic because so much of the power of Pluto and Aquarius is really being able to detach from our desires. Pluto is about the desire, and Aquarius is the place of detachment. Okay. And so everything in moderation, right? Like I'm not saying this is the transit to like become a monk and renounce the world, but I'm saying that this is a transit to really look at whatever you're obsessed with or whatever you think is killing you and find some capacity for objectivity within it, to stand back from it and see it clearly. Because that's also the vantage point that Venus is standing from right now on the other side in Leo. So sharing your personality, sharing, like being open to warmth, being open to receiving whatever Pluto's force is. You know what I mean? Like dance with it. Pluto and that opposition to Pluto is about dancing with your deepest desire, but not necessarily merging with it. In fact, the whole point is that it's not the time to merge with it. You merged with it back in January, and now you're looking at it dead in the eye. And so it can feel incredibly destabilizing, and isn't necessarily the word, but intimidating is the word. It can feel intimidating to look at Pluto, to look at, let's say, like all of the potentiality and all the power that exists online, which is another Aquarius realm, all of the power that exists within a group of people or society at large. And then you look at your little self, your little Venus, and you're like, oh, well, these are my subjective desires. This is my subjective heart that just wants to be happy and sing and be joyful. How does that compare to the amount of societal change that each of us are aware of, we are a part of, we are contributing to, but we also have the capacity to, of course, see objectively. So these are the things that I'm really thinking about with this Venus Pluto opposition. And I think over the next few hours today, as the moon crosses Venus, we're going to get an incredibly like vulnerable look into just exactly how this is playing out for us. And I'm sure this will have to do something with personal relationships, with the creative process, with your art, and with your home, and how your emotional comfort, right? This moon and Venus are two of the more, well, I say the most internal signs. They're the personal, the utmost personal, I would say the least active, right? The activity of a Venus and the moon is like reflection and receptivity, right? It's not stuff we can like make plans for other than to go get facial, like have a spa day or like take a headshot. Venus and Leo is very much so good for like seeing yourself reflected in a way in which you feel radiant and beautiful, right? And with the moon being there, it's like there's something very emotional, very personal. and that is often something quite vulnerable. It's like having something very beautiful in your home, and that the that object and your relationship to that object somehow, or rather your identification with that conjunction, your identification with whatever object makes you feel bright and creative and brilliant, your identification with that also brings you into a profound relationship with how the world is changing right now. And so what that makes me think of is precisely this Pluto question of how the world is changing right now, right? What is humanity? Because it is going through a death and rebirth process. So what art means is changing. What art means for humanity is changing. And that's the one thing on my mind the most. I am an artist, and a lot of what I think about is what is the purpose of art? Like, what is the purpose of creation in general? I think we're every single person is creative in their identity, and I don't really care to argue that. I think the more deep we get into Pluto and Aquarius, the more we will realize that defining our humanity on our own terms will come through the Leo side. And this is wisdom from the Pluto polarity point in evolutionary astrology, but also the wisdom of Jupiter that's going to be in Leo, the South Node that will be in Leo. I read the South Node not at all as a drain. I read the South Node as what is abundantly present in our lives and what we have a well of resource to be able to draw from immediately. And there is a kind of recuperation process that needs to happen. There's a resurrection that almost needs to happen with the South Node. We need to bring something out from our past, and when the nodes switch, when the South Node goes into Leo, we need to bring out our joy. We need to bring out our personal heart and our personal humanity, simply to balance how far and how quickly we are going to go into firstly killing off what humanity is. And of course, that is the question of what are we here for, right? What is a human? And I think until now, it's been about working, it's been about labor, it's been about a very linear Capricornian process of growth and maturing. But I think what we're coming to in the age of like greater technology, greater possibility, greater, even aging isn't happening the same way. There's been just how many generations of people now actually working on healing trauma. These are not new things anymore. And so our collective psyche, the makeup of what humanity is for, is changing, right? It's like literally what it means to be a human is not going to be the same. And this is, of course, a 17-year process with Pluto. That's the entirety, that's the whole time it'll be in Aquarius for 17 more years till 2043. And I'll end with this, which is that in February of this year, we had the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which is a once in every 36-year cycle. In that Saturn-Neptune cycle, sorry for shaking, we build our dream. We build out our dream. Okay. It will take 17 years for Neptune to oppose Pluto. I'm sorry, Neptune to oppose Saturn. Saturn in 17 years, in the same time, almost the same exact time as Pluto moves fully through Aquarius, is the whole time that it's going to take for Saturn to move and oppose Neptune. What happens at the Saturn-Neptune opposition is that we see visibly the dream that we have created that was seeded in this February time, which is also very close to when Pluto finally stepped into Aquarius for good, right? Or like without going backwards anymore. So this correlation between Pluto moving its entire way through Aquarius and the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries, which is about building out our dream, these are taking the same amount of time. Pluto and Aquarius is the backdrop for us building out the dream of this present moment, building out the dream of who we are in Aries. Okay, so that again is a 17-year process, but I just want to put it in context of this Venus-Pluto opposition right now, because it's the same, it's like such a similar dynamic that's going on. Right? There's something much more broad that's playing out right now, and we're just getting a glimpse right now of what Pluto has done in our lives in terms of how it has changed humanity so far, how it has come called into question our own process of evolution. Pluto killing off any Aquarian archetype, Aquarian being evolution and individuation. And for Pluto to finish its cycle, we need to keep building a dream, even when experimentation seems to be no longer the way we're going to build the dream, right? Experimentation being Aquarius, Pluto, of course, kind of killing off this process of experimentation. I know for myself, things don't work in the way that I thought they would for, let's say, building a business or building a relationship. There's no playbook anymore. And I think I can't even say it's ultimately for the good because it is truly just new neural experiences. And of course, there's an argument that nothing under the sun is ever fully new, which I fully agree with. But from the vantage point of our linear, subjective, very lunar ego minds, it is brand new. This is brand new stuff. And this Venus-Pluto opposition is really first opportunity for us to tap into what we are subjectively seeing with the change in humanity, not letting it crush us, not letting it repolarize us into something else. This Venus also being a precursor to Jupiter, which will move into Leo over the summer, I believe, at the end of July. And shortly around that time, the nodes also enter the same Leo and Aquarius. And this is really, I would say, the biggest moment of this whole 17-year cycle over the next few years, where we have such concentration of Aquarian energy with the North Node co-present to Pluto. And we will have, over this next year, Jupiter on the South Node in Leo. And so there is that dance that has to be practiced. It's the dance that has to be danced between Jupiter and Pluto and between the South Node and the North Node and the well of creativity that each of us has access to, and how that well of creativity actually allows us to conceive of the future in a way we have never before. Conceive of, the horizon line as not something that is like we have to chase it anymore, right? That Aries Saturn present moment really just wants us to be there in the present moment. Let it wash over us and really redefine what life is for, away from meeting goals and towards, I don't know, right? Towards what you want. So that is what I wanted to get across today, this week. I'm trying to think. Friday, we have Chiron entering Taurus, which relieves the pressure on the Aries that we've been feeling. Jupiter will square Chiron at some point, and so we will feel into the creative expansion and how, hopefully that actually allows us to heal something materially with Chiron in Taurus. Making a strong decision with Jupiter in Leo, making a strong creative decision about our creative wisdom helps us to really see the healing of Chiron and Taurus, which is about, healing our resources, healing, our fertility. So that is also up later this week on Friday, and I really do think that's going to feel very, very palpable. I feel we are really kind of in the final moments of this Chiron Aries, which can be so difficult for the self-concept. And because we're not fully done with this Chiron Aries yet, it will go back into Aries. Chiron will only be in Taurus for just under 3 months, and then it will go back into Aries. I don't think we are fully done with this healing of our self-concept and healing of the existential wounds that we might have probably been living with over the last 8, 9 years. And yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And then, of course, Sunday we have Cancer season starting, which I love as a Cancer, but it is very emotional. And it does also deepen in that rulership of the moon that I mentioned. Everything is ruled by the moon right now. And that's just incredibly important. you know, I guess everything but the sun is ruled by the moon right now until Sunday, because the sun, oh, what am I saying? It's Gemini season. The sun will rule itself once it gets into Leo later in the summer. Um, that's what I have. That's what I wanted to share today. Um, Ultimately, the message is you are not your mind. You are not your mind. And that is what Pluto in Aquarius wants you to realize. If you are to identify with anything at this time, make it your heart. Make it that Leo South node because you are then identifying with an abundance. You're identifying with even at this point, South Node's still in Virgo, right? Identify with your rituals. Identify with your own purity, which is not the distorted version of purity, but it is the practices that connect you to God. And by this point in this nodal cycle, I think many of us have straightened out which God we are praying to, which God we are devoting to through right action, right? That's that Virgo South node. So Mercury slowing down in Cancer, ruling that South node just says that there is a huge process of emotional devotion, right? The devotion, the rituals that we are doing are ancestral by nature, they are emotional, and we are here to just let them flow, right? It's not about constricting with that South node, it's about releasing and letting the release fortify the path forward, right? Let the emotional truths that want to be spoken, use them devotionally in prayer, again, to connect yourself to the highest, the most expansive God, the most loving, the most forgiving, the one that is so unfathomable with the North Node in Pisces, and taking action on that because Neptune, the ruler of the North Node, is in Aries. If you are inspired by this, creative process, the artistic process that I'm speaking to, I'm having a workshop on next Saturday, the 27th, for artists, astrology for artists. And we will look at, it's a very small group, maybe 5 people, 6 people. And we will look at your core rulerships as they track to your natural creative process. So whether you're a professional artist or you're aspiring to start making more or anywhere in between, this will show you your natural creative process and we'll work through um, a writing portion and then we will be sharing our writing and then I'll walk you through your core rulerships as they align to creative process through the materials that you likely use, through the thematics and the content that usually comes or that naturally I would say wants to come out of your creative process. So that's what I have today, my friends. Let me know what you think. Thank you for listening, and goodbye for now.